Good morning, everyone. Okay, we'll continue our book reading this morning. The Way to Science Excellence by Jeffrey K. Liker and Karen Ross. Last week, we started a new chapter, chapter 6, which says microprocess principles, which says make work pattern visible for continuous improvement. We also looked at microprocess principle, and it defined it as it defined macro process as a set of framework for micro process. It defined as a set of puzzles that you need to put together, like details you need to put together in an organization to make things work. Today we'll continue on page 186, which said principle 6, which says stabilize and continually adopt work pattern. Remember in chapter 5, the last part, we're talking about leveling work pattern. Today we're looking at in chapter 6 and it's still talking about same adopting a leveled work pattern. So principle 6 today says stabilize and continually adopt work pattern. We described leveling as one of the most misunderstood lean concepts in service organization. Standards are the most abused lean concepts by people who think they understand it. It seems remarkably easy to create rules and procedures, more difficult to enforce them, and really hard to imbibe them in a learning culture. On the one hand, standards create order, and most of us would agree that without them we would have an anarchy. How many people will enjoy a world with no traffic rules or property ownership rules or safety rules? In fact, rules are the foundations of civilization. On the other hand, think of bureaucracy, and what immediately comes to mind is red tape, waiting in a long line, filling out complex forms. In lean terms, waste. We have been critical of mechanistic organization because they fail to adapt to the rapidly changing world we live in. But we do not think the cause of the way of thinking of mechanistic organization. So we do not think the cause of this stagnation is rules. Rather, the way rules are used is a symptom of the deeper way of thinking of mechanistic organization. Coercive versus enabling bureaucracy. My colleague Paul Adler made a breakthrough in organizational theory when he suggested bureaucracy is not necessarily limiting. He was not enraptured by Toyota, but as a Stanford professor, he worked and lived near the Toyota GM joint venture. He was intrigued with all that was written about it, and he made a visit, which led to an intensive study. He expected to see continuous improvement in action driven by an empowered team in a highly organic organization. What he actually saw surprised him. There seemed to be endless rules, or in Toyota's vernacular, standards. They were visible everywhere you looked. Signs, lights, standard work posted at the workplace, metric boards, signs indicating jobs that were critical to quality, visible safety procedures. Yet a deeper look confirmed what he had read about continuous improvement. Work groups, down to the individual worker, were empowered to alert management to deviation from the standard and to suggest improvement. Procedures normally owned by engineers were the responsibility of the work group. He concluded, what the NUMMI experiment shows is that hierarchy and standardization, with all their known advantages for efficiency, need not build on the logic of coercion. They can build instead on the logic of learning, a logic that motivates workers and taps that potential contribution and taps their potential contributions to continuous improvement. Adler made a key distinction between coercive bureaucracy and enabling bureaucracy. Coercive bureaucracy is what we are used to seeing and is associated with all the negative stereotypes about the inefficiency of government. In an enabling bureaucracy, rules, procedures, and standards support work groups in doing safe, efficient, high-quality work. Once standards are set, they are to be followed as they are to be best, as they are the best way, as they are the best we know today. But as Henry Ford extolled in his 1926 classic, Today and Tomorrow, today's standard is the necessary foundation on which tomorrow's improvement will be based. If you think of standardization as the best you know today, but which is to be improved tomorrow, you get somewhere. But if you think of standards as confining, then progress stop. As we will see, enabling bureaucracy is empowering and a key to service excellence. But first, let's look in on an example of coercive bureaucracy at its worst. Okay, this is where we'll stop for our reading today. We're talking about stability and continuity, and also coercive versus enabling bureaucracy. So stabilize and continually adapt work pattern is another way in a lean concept where you talk about standards. Talk about people, where you stabilize a work pattern, also and continue to adapt new work pattern that can make work efficient and work well. Where you talk about manage visually to see actual versus standards, building quality as each step, and use technology to also enable people. Then we also talked about coercive versus enabling bureaucracy, focusing on enabling bureaucracy, where you have continuous improvement and continuous growth in an organization. Still talking about standardization. Standard is not something you just put in place, and leave it there. It is not confining. Rather, it is a progressive step. It's something you continue to improve on day by day. So that's just a brief summary of our book reading this morning. Thank you.